Why China can't beat the US. The fundamental reason. Hey buddy, let's talk about the US and China today. Specifically, who's got the upper hand in this global rivalry? You've probably heard of Tim Marshall's book, The Power of Geography. In it, he makes a pretty strong case that the US became a superpower largely because of geography. Think about it. The US is like a fortress surrounded by oceans. The Atlantic on one side, the Pacific on the other. That means, historically, it didn't have to worry too much about land invasions, and it could easily access global trade routes by sea. Compare that to Russia, for example. Russia barely has any warm water ports, and most of its coastal areas freeze over in winter. The few ports they do have, like in Crimea, are bottlenecked by Turkey's control of key waterways. China isn't much better off. Sure, it's got a massive landmass, but it's blocked in by the Himalayas to the west, and to the east, its access to the Pacific is heavily restricted. Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, they all act like a giant wall keeping China from fully breaking out into the ocean. The South China Sea is China's main gateway, but even that's a hot zone where it faces resistance from its neighbors in the US. Meanwhile, the US? It has massive, open coastlines that let it project naval power anywhere in the world. That's why it dominates global trade routes and why its navy is so powerful. The US isn't just lucky. It took full advantage of this strategic blessing, pumping money into its navy, aircraft carriers, and control of the seas. Space equals power. To be an empire, you need space. Space itself is an asset. Just like we think of real estate as an investment, land and sea are forms of capital. The US has both in spades. And it doesn't stop there. Transportation is a game changer too. Take rivers, for example. The US has the Mississippi River, which runs straight down the continent, making north-south trade incredibly efficient. China's big rivers, like the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers, run east-west, which is great for connecting different regions, but there's no natural north-south waterway. That's why China had to dig massive canals during the Sui dynasty just to move goods across the country. But here's the thing. Shipping goods by water is way cheaper than by land. No need to climb hills, dig tunnels, or deal with friction. That's why historically, superpowers controlled sea routes. It's no accident that the Persian and Roman empires built vast road networks. Controlling trade and military movement is key to staying on top. Fast forward to modern times, and you see the same thing with the US highway system. Ever notice how every major highway exit in the US has a McDonald's and a gas station? That's no coincidence. It's all about keeping people and goods moving efficiently. The battle for digital space. But hey, these days it's not just about physical space. It's about digital space too. The internet is basically the new frontier, and the US is way ahead in that department as well. Look at internet content. Around 60% of the web is in English. Russian is the second biggest at just 8.7%. Chinese? Only 1.4% of web content is in Chinese, despite China having a massive population. That's a huge gap. Essentially, the US and English-speaking countries dominate the internet, just like they do the oceans. And China makes things even harder for itself with its heavy internet censorship. Want to watch YouTube in China? You've got to use a VPN. That's like voluntarily cutting yourself off from the biggest global information exchange in history. Imagine if the British Empire had refused to engage in global trade. It just doesn't make sense. Then there's the language barrier. The Chinese language is based on characters rather than an alphabet, which makes it harder to digitize and type efficiently. This might sound like a small thing, but in a world where speed and efficiency matter, that puts China at a disadvantage compared to languages that use simpler phonetic scripts. China's wild card, space exploration. So what's China's counter-move? Well, they've been saying, fine, if we can't expand on land or sea, we'll go to space. China has been pushing hard into space exploration. They landed the Chang'e 4 rover on the far side of the moon in 2019. They're planning a lunar base by 2025 and have their own space station, Tiangong. Their logic? If physical and digital space are already dominated by the US, they need to claim outer space as their next frontier. But here's the problem. Space is ridiculously expensive to conquer. The ocean? You just slap a triangular sail on a boat and boom, you're crossing the Atlantic. But space? You need massive rockets, insane amounts of fuel, and the energy costs are through the roof. Even if China or any country wants to dominate space, it's going to cost them a fortune. The US has a head start here too, thanks to private companies like SpaceX. While China's space program is government-run, the US has companies like Elon Musk's SpaceX pushing the boundaries faster and cheaper. Final thoughts. At the end of the day, the US still has the upper hand. It controls the seas, it dominates the digital world, and its transportation networks are world-class. China is making big moves in AI, electric vehicles, and other advanced industries. But breaking through the barriers of geography, language, and censorship isn't easy. The US has built-in advantages that won't go away anytime soon. And unless China finds a way to overcome its limitations, whether through tech, space, or some game-changing innovation, it's going to be tough for them to truly surpass the US. Let's keep an eye on this. It's going to be one hell of a show. Catch you next time. Thanks for watching.